This company was our mother's, the girls told the millionaire. Then something terrible happens next. The silence of the Pennsylvania morning was broken by the sound of running feet on the polished marble of Harrisburg's most imposing commercial building. William Sterling, 45, adjusted his Italian silk tie for the third time while observing through the 20th floor panoramic window the construction sites he had built over 2 decades. His hands trembled slightly, not from nervousness, but from expectation. This would be the most profitable day of his life. White stone construction, the empire he had built brick by brick since he was 25, would finally be sold for $100 million. Thomas Silverton, a hotel industry entrepreneur from Philadelphia, waited in the conference room with a folder full of documents and a confident smile. For William, it meant definitive financial freedom and the chance to retire to a farm in the countryside, far from the responsibilities that had consumed him since losing his daughter Emily. In an accident 7 years earlier, Miriam Hayes, his legal assistant for 15 years, meticulously organized the contracts on the mahogany table. A 38-year-old woman, her black hair always tied in a severe bun, she knew every detail of the company better than the owner himself. Her dedication was exemplary, working late into the night to ensure everything went perfectly on this decisive day. "Mr. Sterling, all the documents are ready," said Miriam, her controlled voice masking the anxiety she felt. "Mr. Silverton has already reviewed the numbers. We can begin the signing." William nodded, walking to the table where the future awaited him in printed letters. Thomas stood up, extending his hand in a firm handshake. "Congratulations, William. You've built something extraordinary here." The sound of raised voices in the hallway interrupted the ceremony. The secretary was trying to block someone outside, but her voice mingled with 2 others, higher-pitched and desperate. The door burst open, and 2 girls stormed into the room, leaving everyone paralyzed. The smaller one, about 4 years old, had messy brown hair and dirty clothes that looked as if they had been found in the trash. Her green eyes shone with a mixture of fear and determination. She held a yellowed envelope tightly against her small chest. The older sister, 12, immediately took a protective stance in front of the younger one. Her clothes were also inadequate, but her posture radiated a courage that contrasted with her age. "This company belongs to our mother," declared Isabella, the older one, her voice trembling but firm. "You stole everything from her." The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of traffic below. William felt as if the world had stopped spinning. Thomas frowned, clearly annoyed by the interruption. Miriam stood up quickly, addressing the girls with a severe expression. "How did you get in here?" "Security!" Miriam shouted, but Isabella did not back down. "My mother's name was Claudia Davenport," the girl continued, ignoring the threats. "She worked here a long time ago. She said this company belonged to our Uncle Robert." The name hit William like a punch to the gut. Robert Davenport had been his partner 15 years ago, a man who had died suddenly of a heart problem, leaving his share of the company to William through a will that had always seemed too convenient. He had never deeply questioned the circumstances, absorbed as he was with the rapid growth of the business. Penny, the younger one, took a step forward and held out the yellowed envelope with small, trembling hands. "Mommy said to keep this and never lose it," she whispered, her childlike voice echoing in the luxurious room like an echo from another world. William hesitated, looking at the dirty, malnourished children who claimed to have rights to his empire. Something in Penny's gaze deeply disturbed him. There was an unsettling resemblance to Emily at the same age, the same expression of innocent trust mixed with vulnerability. Thomas slammed his folder on the table, clearly irritated. "William, what the hell is going on here? You didn't tell me about any legal loose ends." "There are no loose ends," William replied automatically, but his voice didn't sound convincing even to himself. "These children are confused. Miriam approached the girls with quick movements, trying to take the envelope from Penny's hands. "You have no right to be here. I'm calling the police." Isabella placed herself between Miriam and her little sister, protecting the envelope. "My mother told us you would try to scare us, but we have proof." The yellowed envelope seemed to pulse in the room, as if it contained secrets capable of destroying everything William had built. He slowly approached the girls, crouching to be at Penny's level. Their eyes met, and for a moment he saw Emily looking back at him. "How did you get here?" he asked softly, ignoring Thomas's protests in the background. "We walked a long way," Penny replied, her hand still clutching the envelope. "Mommy said that when we grew up, we had to come and get what was ours." Isabella added, "Our mother passed away 2 years ago. Before she left, she told us about this company, about Uncle Robert, about how everything was taken from our family. She gave us this envelope and said that one day we would understand." William slowly extended his hand. Penny watched him for a long moment, as if assessing whether she could trust him, before handing over the envelope with a solemnity disproportionate to her age. William's fingers trembled as he touched the aged paper. Inside, he found old photographs, documents bearing the white stone construction letterhead from 15 years ago, and at the center of it all, a document that made him turn pale. A birth certificate showing Robert Davenport as the brother of Claudia Davenport Santos, the mother of Isabella and Penny. William's world collapsed. If Robert had a sister, if that sister had daughters, then everything he believed about the legitimacy of his inheritance was wrong. The empire he had built, the money he was about to receive, the life of luxury he led, it could all be built on a lie. Thomas stood up abruptly, grabbing his folder. "William, I'm not signing anything until this is cleared up. Call me when you resolve this situation." The words echoed like a sentence in the now empty room, except for William, Miriam, and 2 beggar girls who had just destroyed $100 million in a single afternoon. Night fell over Harrisburg like a heavy curtain, but sleep did not visit William's luxurious apartment. He remained seated in his leather armchair, watching the 2 girls sleeping, wrapped in each other's arms on the living room sofa. Penny whispered in her sleep, calling for someone named Mommy, while Isabella kept her protective arms around her younger sister, even while unconscious. Miriam had insisted that he call social services, arguing that abandoned children were not his responsibility, but something in Isabella's desperate gaze, when she begged not to be separated, touched a sensitive chord in his hardened heart. For the first time in years, William remembered what it was like to have someone to protect. "They're lying," Miriam had said before she left, her voice laden with an urgency he hadn't understood at the time. "Robert never mentioned having a family. These children are just opportunists trained by someone to pull a scam." But the documents didn't lie. William had spent hours examining every paper, every photograph, every official seal. The birth certificate was authentic, as was Robert's registration as an original partner in the company that had actually been founded by his father, Anthony Davenport, in 1985. At 5 in the morning, Isabella woke up silently. Her eyes met William's across the dark room, and for a moment the 2 observed each other in silence. The defensive aggression of the previous day was gone, replaced by a sadness too mature for a 12-year-old child. "Are you going to hand us over to someone?" she asked in a whisper, so as not to wake Penny. "I don't know," William answered honestly. "I need to understand what happened to your mother, to my partner, to all of this." Isabella nodded slowly, as if expecting that answer. "I can tell you what I know, but first you have to promise you won't hurt Penny." The word hurt echoed strangely in the room. William realized that these children knew pain intimately, carried invisible scars that went beyond physical poverty. "I won't hurt either of you," he said, surprising himself with the sincerity in his own voice. Isabella took a deep breath before she began. My mother worked here when I was very little. She always spoke of Uncle Robert with affection, said he was the only good family we had. Then one day he got sick, very fast. William leaned forward, absorbing every word. Mum started to suspect that someone was poisoning Uncle Robert. She saw his assistant putting strange things in his coffee, medicines that weren't prescribed by the doctor. When she tried to warn him, they started threatening her. William's blood ran cold. Robert's assistant 15 years ago had been Miriam, a young, newly graduated lawyer who had shown exceptional dedication to her boss. She had been the one who informed him of Robert's heart condition, who organized the documents after his death, who suggested he take full control of the company. My mother copied many important papers before she left. She knew we would need them one day, Isabella continued. After Uncle Robert passed away, men came to our house. They said that if she told anyone anything, something bad would happen to us. Penny stirred in her sleep, and Isabella automatically adjusted her position to make her sister more comfortable. The gesture revealed years of mutual care, two children who had learned to be a family for each other. Is that why you lived on the streets? William asked. Mum tried to start over in other cities, but they always found us. She got very scared, said that powerful people wanted us to stay quiet forever. Isabella paused, swallowing a sob. In the end, she got very sick. Before she passed, she made me promise that when Penny turned 4, I would come to get what was ours. William felt an overwhelming weight settling in his chest. If the story was true, he had built his fortune on the elimination of Robert and the silencing of his family. Worse still, the woman he had trusted for 15 years was responsible for it all. At 7 in the morning, his cell phone rang. Miriam. William, we need to meet urgently. Thomas is reconsidering the purchase, but only if we resolve this situation quickly. How do you plan to resolve it? He asked, watching Isabella, who pretended to be asleep but was clearly listening to the conversation. There are appropriate institutions for these children, and old documents can be easily contested. You can't let opportunists destroy everything we've built. The word "we've built" sounded strange. Miriam always spoke as if she were a partner in the company, not just an employee. Come to the office at 9. Alone, she said before hanging up. William put his phone away and found Isabella watching him with alert eyes. It was her, wasn't it? The girl asked. The woman who hurt Uncle Robert. I don't know yet, he replied, but I'm going to find out. Penny woke up at that moment, rubbing her small eyes and looking for Isabella. When she saw William, she showed no fear, only curiosity. Are you the man who's going to help us? She asked in her childlike voice. The simple question carried an immense weight. William realized he was at a point of no return. Either he protected these children and discovered the truth, risking everything he believed was his, or he handed them over to the system and maintained his comfortable life built on possible blood and lies. I'll try, he replied, surprising himself with the decision he had just made. At 8:30, William left the girls with Teresa, his trusted housekeeper, instructing her not to let anyone into the apartment. Isabella had insisted on hiding a copy of the documents in a safe place, demonstrating a strategic intelligence impressive for her age. When he arrived at the office, he found Miriam organizing papers with frantic movements. She had spread alternative contracts on the table, versions that minimized any questions about the legitimacy of the ownership. Thomas has agreed to proceed if we guarantee that these children pose no legal threat, she said without looking up. I've prepared documents showing that Robert had no legitimate heirs. And what if he did? William asked calmly. Miriam finally faced him, and he saw something cold and calculating in her eyes that he had never noticed before. Then he should have made that clear before he died, she replied. But dead men tell no tales, William, and abandoned children have no legal credibility. The coldness in her voice confirmed all the suspicions that were beginning to form. William realized that Miriam was not just an accomplice, she was the architect of it all. "You poisoned him," he said, not as a question, but as a statement. The silence that followed was deafening. Miriam stopped organizing the papers, her hands frozen on the documents. "Prove it," she finally said, her mask of dedication falling away completely. The confrontation in the office was interrupted by the unexpected arrival of Thomas Silverton, who burst through the door unannounced. His face was red with irritation, and he carried a bulky folder that he threw onto the table with force. "William, I've just received some very interesting information about your situation," Thomas said, completely ignoring Miriam. "I hired a private investigator to check these claims, and I discovered some fascinating things about the history of white stone construction." Miriam turned pale, her hands trembling slightly as she tried to gather the scattered documents. "Mr. Silverton, these are just baseless allegations from abandoned children. Children who have authentic documents and a consistent story," Thomas interrupted. Opening his folder, my investigator managed to track down Robert Davenport's hospital records from the last months of his life. Anomalous levels of substances in his blood that didn't match his prescribed medication. William felt the floor disappear from under his feet. The truth he had been avoiding was being exposed by a stranger, someone who should have been just a buyer interested in his business. "Furthermore," Thomas continued, pulling photographs from the folder, "I found records that Miriam Hayes was the beneficiary of a substantial life insurance policy from Robert Davenport. Curious for a simple assistant, don't you think?" Miriam stood up abruptly, knocking over her chair. "You don't know anything. Robert was sick. I just took care of him when no one else cared. You took care of him by slowly poisoning him with digitalis in increasing doses," Thomas said coldly. "My investigator spoke with the pharmacy where you bought unprescribed medication. They remember a young lawyer who claimed to be helping an elderly boss very well." William watched the scene as if in a nightmare. 15 years of his life had been built on a lie, and now the truth was being revealed by someone he barely knew. "Why are you doing this?" William asked Thomas. "Why investigate so much if you just wanted to buy the company?" Thomas smiled, but there was no warmth in his expression. "Because, my dear William, I'm not just a businessman interested in expansion. Robert Davenport was my brother-in-law. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of papers falling from Miriam's trembling hands. William felt as if the world was collapsing around him for the second time in 2 days. "My sister Claire was married to Robert," Thomas explained, his voice filled with an old pain. "She left him 2 years before he died, unable to cope with the constant hospitalizations and the strange behavior he developed in his final months. We never understood why he got so sick so quickly." Miriam tried to head for the door, but Thomas blocked her path. "Oh no, dear, you're not going anywhere. 15 years of waiting for justice is too long." "You can't prove anything," Miriam said, but her voice was brittle. "Robert was sick. I just helped speed up the process," Thomas completed, "and then you manipulated William into taking over the company, keeping you in a position of power to control everything from behind the scenes." William finally found his voice. "You knew who I was from the beginning. The purchase offer was a trap. It was the only way to get close to the truth," Thomas confirmed. "I needed Miriam to feel confident enough to reveal her true intentions, and it worked perfectly when those girls showed up yesterday." At that moment, the office phone rang. Miriam took advantage of the distraction to push Thomas and run towards the door, but he was faster, grabbing her by the arm. "Let me go! You don't know who you're dealing with!" she screamed, struggling to break free. "We know exactly who we're dealing with," said a female voice from the entrance. Isabella was standing in the doorway, holding Penny by the hand, Both looked like they had run from somewhere, their borrowed clothes from Teresa disheveled and their faces marked by urgency. "How did you get here?" William asked, concerned. "Aunt Teresa got a call," Isabella explained, breathless. "Someone said you were in danger and we needed to come immediately. But when we got to the building, we saw men coming up the stairs, men who looked dangerous." Miriam smiled bitterly. "Do you think I worked alone all these years? Do you think it was easy to keep this secret for so long?" As if her words were a signal, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed in the hallway. Thomas quickly locked the office door, but everyone knew it would only delay the inevitable. "Miriam, who are these people?" William asked, moving protectively closer to the girls. "Business partners," she replied with a cruel smile. "People who help me keep certain truths buried and who won't let witnesses ruin years of work." Penny began to cry, frightened by the loud voices and the palpable tension in the air. Isabella hugged her, whispering words of comfort while her own eyes filled with tears. Thomas opened the office window, assessing the escape options. "It's too high to jump, but there's a fire escape on the floor below if we can get to the side staircase. And how are we going to do that with armed men in the hallway?" William asked. "There's another way," Isabella said suddenly. "My mother showed me once. She worked here, remember? She knew every corner of the building." The girl went to a file cabinet in the corner of the room and began to push it. "Behind here, there's a door that connects to the office next door. Mom used it when she didn't want to be seen by certain people." William helped move the heavy furniture, revealing a small, discreet door he had never noticed in 15 years of using that office. The irony of the situation was not lost on him. The daughters of the woman Miriam had silenced were now showing the way to salvation. The sound of something being forced against the main door made them act quickly. Thomas went through first, then helped Penny and Isabella. William hesitated for a moment, looking at Miriam, who remained standing in the center of the room. "Come with us," he said impulsively. "Why?" she asked, genuinely surprised. "Because 15 years working together must be worth something. Because maybe you can fix some of the harm you've done." Miriam watched him for a long moment, and William saw something break in her eyes. "It's too late, William. Some things can't be fixed." The main door burst open just as William was crossing the secret passage. The last sound he heard was Miriam shouting, "They escaped through the window," trying to buy them time to escape, running through the building's secondary corridors, carrying Penny in his arms, while Isabella and Thomas guided them through paths only a former employee would know. William realized that his old life was definitively over. It no longer mattered who legally owned the company or how many millions it was worth. What mattered were the two children who now depended on him for survival, and the truth that was finally coming to light after being buried for 15 years. 6 months later, the aroma of fresh coffee filled the small house William had rented on the outskirts of Harrisburg. It was a simple structure, very different from the luxurious apartment where he used to live, but the laughter that echoed in the morning was worth more than all the marble and crystal he had lost. Penny ran through the yard, chasing butterflies, her brown hair shining under the Pennsylvania sun. Her clothes were simple but clean, and for the first time in her young life, she had toys scattered on the grass. Isabella was sitting under the maple tree, reading a book William had bought for her, her school notes spread out beside her. Life had changed drastically for everyone. After the escape from the office that terrible day, Thomas had used his connections to ensure the authorities properly investigated Robert Davenport's case. Miriam had disappeared that night, leaving only a written confession that detailed years of manipulation and crimes. The men who helped her were arrested, revealing a small blackmail ring that operated in several companies in the region. William lost Whitestone Construction. The courts determined that the company legally belonged to the heirs of Robert Davenport, Isabella, and Penny. But in a twist no one expected, The girls, through their state-appointed lawyer, proposed a deal. William would continue to manage the company as their legal guardian until Isabella turned 18. He didn't know the truth. Isabella had told the judge with a maturity impressive for her 12 years, and he protected us when he found out. Mom always said that good people deserve a second chance. Thomas, surprisingly, had become an unexpected ally. The investigation revealed that he was indeed Robert's brother-in-law, but it also discovered something else. He had hired Miriam years ago, unaware of her past, to work in one of his companies. When he discovered the connection, he decided that true justice would be better than revenge. Robert would have wanted the girls to have a family, he had told William, and you've become that family for them. Saturday morning brought a development that would change everything once again. William was preparing breakfast when someone knocked on the door. It was a middle-aged woman, elegantly dressed, with eyes that seemed familiar. "Are you William?" she asked hesitantly. "My name is Claire Silverton. I'm Thomas's sister, and I was married to Robert Davenport." Isabella appeared at the kitchen door, drawn by the unfamiliar voice. When she saw Claire, her eyes widened. "Aunt Claire?" she whispered, almost in disbelief. Claire began to cry upon seeing the girl. "Isabella, my God, you've grown so much! And Penny? Where is Penny?" The reunion that followed was filled with tears and explanations. Claire told how she had left her marriage to Robert because she couldn't handle his mysterious illness, never imagining he was being poisoned. After he passed, she had tried to find her sister-in-law Claudia and her nieces, but all leads led to dead ends. "Thomas told me about you after everything was resolved," Claire explained. "I was traveling abroad, trying to cope with the guilt of having abandoned Robert when he needed me most. When I learned the truth, I knew I had to come back." Penny, who had initially hidden behind William, slowly approached her aunt. Claire knelt down to her level, extending a hand. "You look just like your mother when she was little," Claire said softly. "She was my sister of the heart, even if not by blood. Robert told me so much about her." "You knew our mommy?" Penny asked, her voice small but curious. "I did, and she told me a lot about you two, about how brave and smart Isabella was, and how Penny had a heart as sweet as an angel's." William watched the scene with conflicting feelings. He was happy for the girls to find more family, but at the same time, he feared it meant losing them. In recent weeks, he had started to imagine himself as their father, filling a void in his heart that had existed since the loss of Emily. Claire noticed his hesitation. "William, can I speak with you in private?" The two stepped out onto the porch while the girls played in the yard. Claire got straight to the point. "Thomas told me how you took care of them, how you protected these children even knowing it could cost you everything you had built." "They had no one else," William replied simply. "And now they have you, they have me, and they have Thomas too. A real family." Claire paused, watching Isabella teach Penny how to make origami with tree leaves. "I didn't come here to take them away, William. I came to complete their family." The relief William felt was immense. "What are you proposing? That we be their co-guardians? You have the business experience to secure their financial future, and I can offer the emotional stability that comes from having a mother figure present. We can raise these girls together, as Robert and Claudia would have wanted." That night, after Claire left with the promise to return the following week to begin the legal arrangements, William tucked the girls into bed. It was a ritual he had developed in recent weeks, something he had never even done with Emily. "William," said Isabella as he adjusted the blanket, "can I ask you a question?" "Of course. Do you miss your old life? The expensive cars and the big apartment?" William thought about the question honestly. He looked around the simple room the girls shared, decorated with drawings Penny had made and books Isabella collected. He heard the soft breathing of Penny, who had already fallen asleep holding a teddy bear he had bought for her. "No," he answered with absolute sincerity. "I don't miss anything about that life." Not even a little bit? Well, maybe I missed the espresso from the Italian machine, he said, smiling, but I've learned to make a pretty good coffee on the stove. Isabella giggled softly. And we've learned that real families aren't made of blood, they're made of choices. The next day, William received an unexpected call. It was the police, informing him that Miriam had been found in another city and was willing to cooperate with the justice system. She had revealed the full extent of her actions and those of her accomplices, ensuring that other families would not be harmed. She asked for this to be delivered to you, sir, the officer said, handing him a sealed envelope. Miriam's letter was brief. William, I know I can't undo the harm I've caused, but I can ensure that the whole truth is known. Robert was a good man who deserved better. His nieces do too. Thank you for giving me the chance to do the right thing in the end. Take good care of them. 3 months later, in a simple ceremony at the Harrisburg courthouse, William signed the official adoption papers for Isabella and Penny. Claire was by their side as co-guardian, and Thomas served as a witness. Whitestone Construction was thriving under the new, transparent management, with an educational fund established to secure the girls' future. That night, as the newly formed family celebrated with a homemade cake Claire had made, Penny climbed onto William's lap and whispered in his ear, "Daddy, can you read me a story?" It was the first time she had called him Daddy. William felt his eyes fill with tears as he carried her to her room, followed by Isabella and Claire. As he read about brave princesses and dragons who became friends, William realized he had found something more valuable than all the millions he had lost. He had found a family he chose to love, and who chose to love him back. Outside, the stars shone over the small house in Harrisburg, witnessing the end of a story of greed and betrayal, and the beginning of a new narrative of love, forgiveness, and second chances. Whitestone Construction would continue to exist, but now it built more than buildings. It built a future where justice and love walked side by side. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to my channel. I promise to bring you videos every day that will make your life happier. Please comment on what you thought of my story with a rating from 0 to 10, and thank you very much.